So when you look at a border, what do you actually see? Is it just a line on a map?
Or is it maybe something more like a scar on the earth itself?
Yeah, exactly. And that question, it's not really about geography, is it? It's about where cultures meet, where they collide.
And sometimes, maybe tentatively, start to blend.
So forget the neat definitions. Let's dive into the raw stuff, the unspoken reality when different worlds actually brush up against each other.
Right. Imagine a world where every culture is in its own perfect little snow globe.
Beautiful to look at, sure.
Pristine, unique. But wouldn't that also be incredibly lonely, that kind of isolation?
Hmm, that's the tension, isn't it?
It is, that pull between keeping your identity safe and that, basic human need for connection.
That's the knot we're kind of trying to pick apart today.
So is real peace found when we stay separate? Or does it happen in the messy, complicated business of actually coming together?
I remember I was trying to learn a new language once, and I had this, well, almost naive
It's a
idea.
magic key idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That it would just unlock this whole other culture. Simple as that.
But it wasn't quite like that.
Not at all. It felt more like I kept bumping into these invisible walls. Walls I didn't even know were there.
Beyond just the words.
Totally beyond the words. It was like a whole different way of seeing things, unspoken rules, deep assumptions. It made me think, how much understanding is actually nonverbal?
Well, think about how we talk about diversity. We champion it, right?
Yeah.
We use the celebratory emojis online.
We do.
But what happens when our own ways, our traditions get questioned? Does that enthusiasm wobble a bit?
Yeah, does it become conditional?
Exactly. Is it real acceptance or is it more like tolerance with a little asterisk? Fine, as long as it doesn't challenge me too much.
So are we drawing lines without even realizing it? That's a pretty fundamental question.
It is. Is our embrace unconditional or does it have limits?
So look at any news headline about cultural conflict anywhere in the world. If you strip away the specifics, the names, the places, the immediate why, isn't there often something underneath, like a really basic, almost primal fear?
To go the other.
Yeah, the unfamiliar, the not us. It's like we have 1,000 different languages, but they're all expressing that same core anxiety.
Which leads to another thought. What if the very things that make a culture beautiful, vibrant, unique?
Yeah.
What if those are the exact things that make it resistant to blending easily with others?
Huh. Like its strength is also its barrier?
Sort of. Think about intricate rituals, founding myths, core beliefs. Could the beauty itself create the boundaries? It's a paradox, right? Are the brightest colors the hardest ones to mix?
I visited this place once, and hospitality was everything, like a sacred duty.
Okay, very welcoming on the surface.
Totally. But then, in quieter moments, you'd hear this deep suspicion about outsiders. It felt ancient, woven right in.
That contrast, open arms, but also deep wariness.
It just shows how complex these interactions are. They're rarely simple. What history creates that kind of attitude?
And we talk about cultural pride. It's seen as healthy, right? Affirming your identity.
Sure.
But where does that pride tip over? When does it become, well, exclusionary, like a kind of modern tribalism?
Is celebrating yourself always tied to creating an other? Like Nietzsche might suggest.
It's such a fine line, isn't it? Cherishing your own versus, I don't know, casting a shadow on difference.
There's that old saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do.
Sounds straightforward. Good advice for getting along.
Seems like it. But what if the Romans, maybe for good reasons, maybe not, don't actually want you doing what they do?
Yeah. The saying kind of glosses over the power dynamics, doesn't it?
The unspoken pressure, the expectation to assimilate, often from the dominant group.
And history, well, history is full of examples. Empires built on forcing different peoples together.
Forced integration.
Think about the lost languages, the silenced traditions. How many ghosts whisper those stories?
It wasn't just politics changing hands, it was identities being erased.
What can those echoes teach us now about the real cost of unity that's forced from the top down?
Okay, take a breath, just
Okay.
for a second. Think about a time, any time you felt like an outsider. Was it mostly the language difference, or was there something else, something deeper, harder to pin down?
Often it's more than words, isn't it? It's like not having the key to the unspoken cultural code, that feeling of being on the edge.
Right. And we talk a good game about inclusivity, the global village idea.
We do.
But let's be honest with ourselves. How often have you felt just a flicker of impatience, maybe even judgment, when someone doesn't get your references, your inside jokes?
Oof. Yeah, That uncomfortable mirror.
It shows that tendency we all have, maybe unconsciously, to expect others to navigate our world, our culture.
Okay, here's a tough one. Imagine a defining memory from your culture. Maybe something painful, historical, or a key story.
Got it.
Would you erase that memory to fit in perfectly somewhere new? Or would you carry it, even if it meant you'd always be a bit separate?
Wow. That's brutal. Can a culture truly integrate if it forgets who it was?
It's a core dilemma. And think about today's world so connected, right? Global travel, instant everything.
Yet supposedly shrinking.
So why do so many neighborhoods, even in the same city, still feel like completely separate countries? Different rules, different vibes, invisible borders?
Has globalization really broken down those deep local barriers or just papered over them?
And can you really truly say you appreciate another culture if you haven't wrestled with its shadows, its contradictions, its unspoken fears and histories?
Superficial appreciation is easy, isn't it? Just admiring the surface.
But genuine understanding, that takes digging deeper, facing the uncomfortable stuff.
I have to admit, I believe in the idea of a borderless world, free exchange, all that.
The ideal.
Yeah. But then the thought of losing my own cultural touchstones, the things that make me feel grounded, honestly, it scares me a little.
That's a really common paradox, I think. We want unity, but we cling hard to what feels like home, culturally.
I remember a refugee told me something powerful once. She said, they opened their homes, sure, offered shelter.
Okay, practical help.
But, she said, they never really opened their stories to mine.
Wow. That says so much. The gap between physical welcome and real connection, emotional, cultural acceptance.
Hospitality isn't always enough, is it?
Maybe not. And perhaps sometimes the deepest respect we can show isn't pushing relentlessly for perfect integration.
What?
Maybe it's honestly acknowledging that some gaps, some fundamental differences might never fully close. Maybe the goal isn't blending into one, but respectful coexistence. Recognizing difference.
It's interesting. We post all this stuff online about unity, right? Understanding each other.
Performative unity sometimes.
Well, yeah, because at the same time, the algorithms are busy building these echo chambers around us. They reinforce our biases.
So are we really engaging with difference? Or just talking to people who already agree with us?
Good question. Okay, another moment for honesty. Be real with yourself. Have you ever felt that jolt, that visceral discomfort when someone else's traditions just felt too other?
I think most people probably have, if they're truly honest, those gut reactions.
They're unsettling, but maybe acknowledging them is the first step, better than pretending they don't happen.
Towards actually understanding, yeah.
I saw this child once from a minority background, and they were just meticulously copying the dominant culture, every gesture, every phrase.
Trying to fit in.
Yeah, but it felt like they were losing bits of their own heritage with every imitation. Was that successful integration? Or was it, I don't know, erasure?
A quiet kind of loss. It makes you think about the subtle pressures, doesn't it?
Definitely. Now, let's flip this completely.
Okay.
Imagine your culture, the stuff you value, suddenly being the one that's misunderstood, flattened into stereotypes, often negative ones.
How would that feel?
Yeah. That mental switch, putting yourself in those shoes, it can really spark some empathy, can't it?
It forces a different perspective.
We hear that phrase all the time. We're all human. And it's true, of course, fundamentally.
Meant well. Emphasizing common ground.
But does it sometimes accidentally gloss over the incredible diversity, the different ways of being human? Do we really see the humanity in traditions that feel completely alien to us?
Or do we just see the alien part?
Exactly.
And again, looking back, history's pretty clear. Trying to force cultural assimilation, it almost always leaves this bitter residue, resentment that lasts for generations.
Unity by force isn't real harmony. It just plants seeds for more conflict down the line.
So maybe, just maybe, integration isn't about blending into some homogeneous soup.
What is it then?
Perhaps it's more nuanced, like creating space. Space where differences can actually coexist, where unique identities aren't just tolerated, but genuinely valued, without that pressure to disappear into the mainstream.
Holding space for difference. I like that.
But consider this too. What if that intense drive to integrate, that desperate need to fit in perfectly,
Yeah.
what if it's really about that basic human longing to belong? Even if belonging means, well, sacrificing a part of who you really are culturally.
What are we willing to trade for acceptance? That's a heavy question.
Okay, let's pause again. Think about the absolute core of your cultural identity. What's the one part that feels completely non-negotiable? The thread you just couldn't lose.
Identifying that, it really highlights how tough integration can be, doesn't it? What feels non-negotiable to one person might be exactly what another expects them to change.
And notice who often makes the loudest calls for unity? Isn't it frequently the dominant group, the ones who don't actually have to change their language, their customs, their way of life?
Yeah, who's setting the terms? Whose definition of integrated are we even using? It makes you think, like Socrates might ask, whose agenda is being served?
Which brings us back to that border idea, the scar.
Mhm.
Some cultural wounds, maybe from history, maybe from ongoing prejudice, they run incredibly deep. They don't just heal over nicely.
They need understanding, a willingness to face uncomfortable truths.
Absolutely. And if this whole discussion has made you question some of your own assumptions about all this,
Yeah.
maybe share it. Talk about it with someone who comes from a really different background, a different cultural viewpoint than your own.
Those conversations can be hard, but they're where the real understanding starts, right?
Definitely.
What if?
Yeah.
What if your idea of a better culture is really just the one you happen to be born into, the one that feels normal to you?
Ooh, challenging that inherent ethnocentrism, the unconscious belief that our way is the default or even superior.
Right. And is it always progress when cultures merge, a step towards unity?
Or could it sometimes be a quiet tragedy, a fading away of unique voices, unique ways of seeing the world that we can never get back? What's the real long-term value of diversity?
We love that melting pot idea, don't we? Everything blending together smoothly.
It's a common metaphor.
But maybe it's flawed. What if some flavors, some cultures, are meant to be savored on their own, appreciated for their distinctness, not just melted down?
Does the melting pot overlook the beauty of the individual ingredients?
Maybe. Imagine trying to jam two puzzle pieces together that just weren't made to fit,
You might force them temporarily.
but you damage them, right?
Hmm.
The beauty of their individual shapes gets lost in the pressure. Is forced integration ever truly beautiful or sustainable?
Okay, try this. List the things you really love about your own culture, the things you cherish.
Okay, got a few in mind.
Now imagine someone asking you to just let go of one of them, to give it up so you can fit in better somewhere else.
Makes it feel very real, doesn't it? That abstract idea of cultural loss becomes personal.
And sometimes you hear cultures praised as exotic or vibrant. Sounds positive.
It does.
But does that praise sometimes come with a subtle expectation, a quiet pressure to eventually adopt the mainstream ways?
Is it admiration, or is it a kind of backhanded demand to assimilate?
A wise elder once put it beautifully, I thought. They said, the river flows into the sea, yes. It becomes part of something bigger. But the river doesn't lose its name. It doesn't forget where it came from.
That's a powerful image. Integration without erasure.
It offers a different vision. Now, what about the line between cultural exchange, sharing respectfully, and cultural appropriation, taking, often misusing cultural elements?
That's a huge issue. And who gets to draw that line? It feels so blurry sometimes.
It's a critical question, especially now. And we tend to assume that if we just understood each other better, integration would follow naturally.
Knowledge leads to harmony, right?
Well, what if sometimes digging deeper, really understanding another culture? What if that actually reveals differences that are fundamental, maybe even irreconcilable?
So understanding doesn't always bridge the gap. Sometimes it just shows you how wide the gap really is.
It's possible.
Mm.
Which makes you ask, what's the actual goal here? When we talk about integration, are we aiming for genuine harmony, mutual respect?
War.
Or is it just about stopping the fighting? Achieving a kind of surface peace by smoothing over or suppressing the differences? They're not the same thing.
And again, when we say integrated society, whose definition are we using? Usually, it's the dominant culture setting the benchmark, right?
Defining what success looks like,
Yeah.
potentially marginalizing anyone who doesn't fit that specific mold.
I used to think love could conquer all. Transcend cultural boundaries effortlessly.
A romantic notion.
Totally.
Yeah.
But then I saw, up close, all the compromises, the subtle shifts, the cultural adjustments people make, even in loving relationships. Even love involves negotiation.
There's that chilling line from a historian. The graveyard of empires is filled with the bones of cultures that refuse to bend.
Wow, that's stark.
It's a harsh reminder, isn't it, about the potential consequences of inflexibility when faced with overwhelming power.
Think about your own family history. There's probably a story your ancestors carried, maybe across borders, a story of migration, adaptation, maybe loss. Did that story maybe echo in you somehow? Explain why you sometimes feel like you don't quite belong anywhere specific. Our histories live in us.
And have you ever felt that sting? Being told your traditions, the things you grew up with, are outdated or primitive or just plain weird.
That feeling of cultural shame, it builds walls,
Mhm.
big ones.
Maybe this whole idea, this relentless pursuit of complete, seamless integration, maybe it's a kind of comfortable lie
A lie we tell ourselves. Why?
to avoid the messy, difficult reality of actual coexistence, where differences persist and need constant work, constant understanding.
So what's the vision? Are we aiming for a beautiful mosaic, where each distinct tile adds to the overall picture?
Or are we heading towards more of a homogeneous wash of color, where all the unique shades just blend and fade into one?
Here's the ultimate choice, maybe. If you had to pick, preserve your core cultural identity, keep what makes you you,
Oh.
or achieve complete acceptance in a new place, feel totally integrated but maybe lose some of that identity. Which would you choose?
That forces you to weigh your deepest priorities.
And that pressure to integrate, it can be crushing. It can make you feel ashamed of the very things that are unique and valuable about your heritage.
Imagine someone you love chooses to change significantly, alters their cultural identity to fit in somewhere new.
Okay.
Do you just celebrate their acceptance, their belonging, or do you also feel a sense of loss? Do you mourn the traditions they've let go of?
It's incredibly complex emotionally, isn't it?
Absolutely. And maybe, in a world pushing for conformity,
Yeah.
maybe the most radical thing you can do isn't to integrate. Maybe it's to fiercely preserve, to hold on to your uniqueness.
Powerful counter-narrative.
And think about the future. Generations from now, when they look back at us, what will they see? Will it be that vibrant tapestry, all those different cultural threads woven together?
Or will it be more like a faded photograph? A nostalgic glimpse of diversity that's mostly gone.
Our choices now shape that future legacy.
But maybe the deepest connections we can have don't come from being the same.
What then?
Maybe they come from a profound respect for difference, a genuine appreciation for the unique viewpoints each culture offers. Like Jung suggested, embracing the whole picture, shadows and all, leads to true understanding.
I know I've felt that pull sometimes, that urge to kind of smooth my own cultural edges, make things easier for others, maybe make myself more comfortable.
Did it work?
Honestly, not really, not in the long run. Being authentic, even when it's challenging, feels more right, more whole.
And if you've ever felt like you're living on a bridge between two different worlds, never fully fitting in either one, always translating.
You're definitely not alone in that. So many people live in those in-between spaces. It's enriching, but it's also really challenging.
So let's loop back to the very beginning, that question about borders.
The lines on the map, the scars on the earth.
Maybe the most important thing isn't just trying to erase them. Maybe it's understanding why they were drawn in the first place. What history, what forces created them.
Understanding the origins of division, that's often the first step to navigating it better.
Because at the end of the day, integration. It isn't some final destination you arrive at, is it?
No, it feels much more like a process, constant, dynamic.
A negotiation, really. Inside yourself and with the world. With the ghosts of who we were. The messiness of who we are now.
And all the uncertainty about who we might become, especially in a world that's always changing culturally.
So let that sit for a moment. Just take a breath. What unspoken truths about all this, about cultural divides, maybe surfaced for you while we were talking? Just let that linger.
And if this conversation stirred something in you, if it made you think or question,
Then share it. Share it with someone who sees the world differently than you do. Keep this dialogue going.
this was the deep dive. We don't really do easy answers here.
No, just hopefully deeper questions. Questions about the complex, fascinating, sometimes difficult landscape of our shared humanity.